Thank you for joining us today. My name is Wes Sherwood. I'm with the Ford Communications team and having a little trouble seeing you. And we're very pleased to talk with you about a subject that's near and dear to us and some of the other speakers we have here today around trust. And I think we're having an important moment of trust with you in that the climate control will be trending in the right direction. So we're going to warm it up. And hopefully the weather will break, although we don't have as much control on that, so you'll have to trust a higher power for that. But we are here to talk to you about this important subject. For Ford, this has been a core part of our DNA dating all the way back to the early days, and I think Bill Ford just covered a lot of that. But more recently, we've had some very big moments of shifts in trust around our company, and we'll get into that a little bit later and talk about how we're building on that. And then we have guests here. We're very pleased. As we look around and look at these consumer trends, we identify organizations and brands that inspire us and information we take from them and internalize to help us approach it. So we are very honored to have our guests today. First, you'll hear from Tim Erblich from Ethisphere. As you hear more and more about trust, it's becoming something that people are wanting to quantify more and more these days. And so Tim's going to talk to you about how his organization has stepped in to fill a real growing need for organizations like ourselves who are looking to connect with consumers in this meaningful way. And then Rob Michalak from Ben & Jerry's, and had a good chat with Rob last night and mentioned to him just how I connected with Ben & Jerry's just through the naming of their products and how that created a real natural bond and trust over time. And so Rob's going to talk to you much more beyond the naming and has real connections to the roots of the company that I think are really special. And then Anjali, Kumar, from Warby Parker. We've talked a lot about, you've heard a lot about established brands. Well, Anjali is going to talk to you about an emerging brand and really emerging brand that has a business model that sort of flips what the industry has been known for and offers customers new ways to interact with eyewear, but also really, trust on many levels across e-commerce to how you actually get the product and experience it. So really fascinating to see how they've evolved and grown in a short time. And then, not in the room yet, but Jim Farley, who heads up Ford's global marketing initiatives and has one of our most interesting challenges these days of reinventing our Lincoln brand, will be with us to talk about the Ford portion of the story. So, on a housekeeping note, I do just want to say when you're done here, you do have colored dots somewhere marking you, so we'll help get you pointed in the right direction. There will be some time afterwards to grab a beverage, a snack, but we'll get you pointed in the right direction afterwards. And if there aren't any major questions, I'd like to have Tim come up and kick us off. Thank you.
Let's see, good morning everybody. So I do a fair amount of speaking and I always try to pick up things that I learned from people that are really good at it. I'm not going to do the full trick that I've learned, but that is when you go to things like this, besides hearing from the speakers and everybody else, it's really important to meet people that you didn't know. And so somewhere throughout this session, just stand up and introduce yourself to somebody you don't know because it would probably be very, very valuable. So about Ethisphere, who here has heard of Ethisphere? Okay, a little bit. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Ethisphere and I'm going to share some data with you. And then hopefully I'm going to leave you with a couple thoughts that will be useful for you. Okay, so who is Ethisphere? So we got started about 8 or 9 years ago with the notion, can you quantify corporate behavior in a way that correlates better performing companies to better performance? Okay, so we started collecting a lot of data, and we do something called the world's most ethical company ranking. Ford won that a couple of years ago. They also won last year, and I'll tell you a little bit more of why I think it's important and sort of a growing trend to, again, correlate better corporate behavior to better performance. So when you do things like this, you start off with actually a magazine. So this is an issue of our magazine, and actually it's the trust issue. It came out about 6 months ago. And our audience is typically major corporations. Okay, so for example, in this issue, the trust issue, Jeff Immelt of GE served as the guest editor, and we had several other CEOs and global leaders sort of opine on the correlation of trust and what trust means to their business. And when you do things like the world's most ethical company ranking, it's worldwide, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go forward, you get a fair amount of global media. So when we do these things, we'll get picked up anywhere from Financial Times to publications in India or China, or certainly you'll see us on CNBC and so on and so forth. So that's a little bit about Ethisphere. So besides publishing a magazine, typically when you publish a magazine, you put on events such as conferences or webcasts or more. We do something in New York called the Global Ethics Summit. We'll get 500 or 600 folks there. It's a pretty fascinating conference. George Mitchell was one of the keynotes this year, Madeleine Albright the year before. We're doing something supposedly with our partner Thomson Reuters in Brazil in about 10 days, a sort of version of the Brazilian Ethics Summit. We're a little worried about flying down there right now, but so that's sort of what we do. The other thing, and I talked a little bit about measurement. So companies said, okay, can you help us measure and quantify corporate behavior and performance? As they take that further, they've asked us to build out some things around certifications. So can we certify that their policies are in a good place, that they sort of behave ethically? And the next thing that companies are really asking us to think about is the supply chain. So I'll cover it off in a little bit. We're thinking an awful lot about transparency in the supply chain, and the supply chain as a differentiated proposition for how a company behaves, because it's no longer just a relationship between you and that company. It's all of their sort of suppliers, agents, third parties, and it's really not just a sort of local conversation, it's a global conversation. So it's what's important globally, but also what's important in your community. Okay? So I think Bill Ford mentioned something about interbrand. It's interesting when you go to a place like this and you see these giant facilities, and then you think about how the world has evolved. And you think back in 1970, most of a company's assets were tied up in what you call tangible assets, plants, machinery, so on and so forth. Today, and this is only growing up, and that was an interesting question to Mr. Ford, what is Ford going forward? 75% of a company's worth is really their brand, it's in intangible assets. So again, that comes back to what we do, and that is measuring the relationship between performance and behavior. So every year when we do World's Most Ethical Company, last year we had a record 145 companies win that designation around the globe. Those that are publicly traded, we take a look at their stock performance. It's just one metric, and we correlate it against the S&P 500 and the FTSE 1000. And virtually every year running, the WME named companies have outperformed the S&P and the FTSE. So of course I can't stand up here and say, okay, it's 1-to-1, it's linear, it's because you're on that list you outperform. But there's something there. And what does that tell you? It tells you that probably their employees are more engaged, right? Their employees care. If they see something wrong, they're going to raise their hand. It also tells you that their customers are perhaps more engaged. It tells you that they're trying. And all of those things typically equate to better performance. So it's pretty fascinating that, again, it's not 1-to-1, but by and large, companies on this sort of list have outperformed the S&P and FTSE going forward. And I think for those of you who think of corporations as actually leaders going forward, and it's interesting to see what Ford is doing, that's a very good sign. It's a very good sign. So we're really happy to see that. So let's see. What are some of the challenges that corporations face? You could say it's a competitive challenge, you could say it's a war for talent, but an interesting statistic. So 52% of the acquisitions done by NYSE listed companies were outside North America. So that means they're going into emerging markets. They're going into China, they're going into Brazil, they're going into all these places. Nigeria is a place, the most oil-rich place in the world, but it's also a very dangerous place to do business, right? Bribes are commonplace. And so now, this is a recent survey that Ernst & Young did of CFOs and CEOs. 68% of senior executives cite complexity of a regulatory or legal environment in the environments that they operate as their top challenge. So not competition, not war for talent, it's legal and regulatory complexity. So I think, again, coming back to what we do, if we can help measure good corporate behavior and sort of promote transparency, I think that helps us all. The other thing about this is you can see fines every day. Right now, one of the biggest Fortune 10 companies in the world is in a bribery scandal. They're paying lots of money for outside fees, and they'll pay lots of money for fines. But the cost for a brand to recover is typically 6 to 10 times the cost of the fines, sanctions, and fees that they pay. So it's really important. It's really good business for companies to sort of behave really well, and hopefully what we do helps do that. A couple other things I'll share with you. I did speak about why these world's most ethical companies outperform. And for those of you who've been in great performing organizations, maybe your company is, it's always about the people, right? It's always about getting better people in there. So this is a recent study from Stanford and UC Santa Barbara, and it basically said of the recent MBA grads, they would take less money to work for a place that they believed in. So if you come back to talent, if you come back to it's the most engaged people and it's the best people that drive behavior, it's probably not surprising, but it's interesting to see some data. Those of you who probably recently hired MBAs or things like that say, well, mine didn't want to take less money. But this is something that they said, and I think that's actually pretty true. What else can I share with you? The other thing about this, and I'm hold up this magazine, and Jeff Immel of GE took his time to serve as a guest editor. CEOs actually care about this stuff. So one of the neat things, not many of you yet have heard about Ethisphere. Again, we've been around 8 or 9 years. We can virtually get a meeting with almost any CEO in the country because outperforming your competition or leading in ethical performance is just flat out great business. So here's just a couple of quotes from some CEOs to give you a sense that they actually care about this, and I think this is good for us all. And I'm going to read a little bit of a quote, and what I'm going to read from you now, you could probably think was taken from the Journal Today or the New York Times. And it's really an example of what's in the DNA of really good companies. And it says, all companies will be watched more closely and held to a higher standard. Public confidence, which is really trust, in leadership of all major institutions, public and private, is at an all-time low ebb. So when was this written? And by who? It was written by Henry Ford II in 1976. So it's pretty interesting. So what we do is we go around and we talk to companies. I was at Milliken & Company, which is an amazing company, a couple weeks ago, meeting with their leadership, and they told me things like in the year 1900, Roger Milliken sort of mandated that they recycle in all their plants. In 1970, they started measuring how much they reuse waste. So you look at this in 1976, and there's a longer quote, but basically saying, if there's any issue, I want anybody in this company to feel like they can come and talk to me. So it's just interesting when you sort of look back in time and you see what some of the leaders have done. And it's neat. So, just a picture of Mr. Ford. Also, why does ethical performance matter? Okay, we talked about supply chain, but it's interesting right now, 19% of all investing, think of the trillions of dollars that go into markets around the world, the fastest growing category here in the States is in responsible investing. So 19% of all investing is now in responsible investing. CalPERS right now recently actually sued one of the biggest companies in the world. In fact, they sued their directors because they felt they weren't watching ethical performance. So if you look at the sort of ecosystem of how things get done, and we call it conscious capitalism or whatever you want to call it, but all of these sort of stakeholders play a really important role. So again, as you look forward, ethical performance leadership by companies is critically important. So what else are we doing? Just a little bit about us. So we started out with this world's most ethical ranking, and companies, Aflac puts it in the duck's mouth. You can fly out of Hartfield Airport and see taking off again in the right way with the Ethisphere logo in the duck's mouth. The Hartford does TV ads using the logo. But people ask us for more, so we're starting to do a deeper dive with companies' programs, or for companies that really make the cut, we're certifying their programs. Jones Lang LaSalle is one of the biggest real estate companies in the world that operate in 60 countries. They do something called Ethics Society Certified. They've put it in their SEC filings. They've put it in all of their sort of marketing material, but most interesting, they also put it in all their sort of employment applications and customer-facing materials. They feel it's a competitive advantage for them, and I think those are trends that I think you'll see continued going forward. And then let me just sort of tell you what the final thing that's next, and this is the last slide. The supply chain is really now a part of the whole ecosystem of what any company does. We all feel very responsible. If you take a flight and it's contracted to somebody else and it doesn't work, you feel angry at that airline that you contracted with. So the supply chain is really important. So companies have asked us for a way to measure their supply chain. So we've started out something called the supplier risk quotient, to go and sort of ask some questions of the suppliers, create a platform and create a score for that. We've probably done it with about 5 companies. We're probably getting about 100,000 suppliers in there right now. But in terms of what we see next, it's the ability to create a global score for companies to help them decide on whether or not they do business. So with that, I think I'm ready to wrap it up and pass it to my next speaker, Anjali. Oh, I'm sorry. Rob? Okay. All right.
I'm Rob Michalak from Ben & Jerry's. It's great to be here. Trust is the new black. I might add trust is the new pink, because pink is the new black. But better yet, I might say that trust is the new plaid. Because trust is all about relationships. And relationships are complicated. And plaid can be complicated, especially if you wear it with other plaid. What I'm going to talk about is Ben & Jerry's approach to all this, about building trust and building relationships. It goes back to the very early days. I don't know if you know this, but Ben & Jerry's started as a corner neighborhood gas station scoop shop parlor. And this is it. You can see it there. What's great about this shot, by the way, there are very few shots of the gas station because the boys did not know that they were going to be successful. So they didn't take a lot of pictures. But this picture actually has a line out the door. The gas station was only there for a few years. So we are fairly certain that this was one of the first relationship building moments that Ben & Jerry had. At the first birthday, on May 5th, 1979, Ben & Jerry had zero money. P&L, goose egg, nothing. What they had was a lot of ice cream. And what they had was a connection to the community. They said, we have to connect with the community, and we want to give back to the community. So that first gesture was with what they had, which was ice cream. So they scooped all day long until the ice cream was gone, and they said, thank you. And that was the start of a beautiful relationship with customers, and starting to build that trust. 10 years later, we built on it by actually being one of the first companies ever to have a social purpose alongside the economic purpose and the product purpose. And that builds, it galvanizes that relationship, because now we're saying, you know what, we're connected in society. We're connected to each other. And so we said, we have to have social benefits from our economic benefits and our product benefits. And so we wrote it into our mission statement. By the way, if you have mission statements, they have to be alive. They have to be vigorous. Our mission statement is everywhere. It's in every cubby, it's in every hallway, it's in every office, it's wherever you go. It's what we talk about, every meeting. How's the social mission connected? And by the way, you'll see that our social mission is written horizontally because we know psychologically pictures matter. And we want this thing to be in balance. The social mission has to be in balance with the product mission. Can't be this way, can't be that way. It's got to be this way. So that's what we work at. Our model is a model of linked prosperity. That means in every part of our business cycle, throughout our whole value chain, from where we source the seeds for the cocoa and the sugar and the vanilla, to the cows that don't have recombinant bovine growth hormone shot into them, Ouch! We want everything to be real, because relationships are about being real. And so throughout our entire business, we run it the way we think people would want us to run it, with those social mission, product mission, and economic mission, to be really progressive all the way through. It's not only about where we buy our ingredients, it's about where we work. We have a livable wage. We're one of the first to have a livable wage. We also, way back when in the 1990s, we had a lot of people who were same-sex partners. There was no word for it then, but we said, you know what, if you're committed to your partner, you should have the same benefits as others. And so we were one of the first companies to have same-sex partner benefits. And that relationship carries on, because now we stand for marriage equality. And that's tough. This is where relationships get complicated, because not everybody believes in that. But if you're going to stand for something, and stand behind it. And we think this is where the future of business is going, because more and more companies are doing that. So our range is from the warm and fuzzy free cone day, which we carry on from the very first May 5th, 1979, to now globally. It's always in the spring. Look for it. By the way, Jerry always says, if you get your free cone, go back to the end of the line and get another one. And we actually see a lot of people come through the line. But now we're doing millions of cones, and that's a warm and fuzzy. But on the more complicated end, the relationship with consumers and customers is, we're a food company. We're an agribusiness. How are we supporting that relationship between the people that grow our food and the people that eat our food? And right now, we're one of the few companies that's a consumer products company that is standing up against genetically modified organisms or genetically engineered agriculture. We don't believe in it. And so we're saying, you know what, there are laws coming up in legislatures all around the country. We're saying we support mandatory labeling for non-GMO. It doesn't make us the most popular with other consumer products companies, because they don't want that kind of regulation. But if you're going to stand for something, stand for something. People see that, they understand that, and so that builds the trust, because they know where you stand, right or wrong. Or some might say it's a little bit of madness. We've probably had the most cows show up on Congress's lawns over the years. Some of these protests have been against cloned animals in the food supply, or drilling in Alaska, or back in 2010, the Supreme Court said, you know something? We're going to make a ruling. It's called Citizens United. We're going to give personhood to corporations. Well, what better corporation than Ben and Jerry's to speak up on this? Because, Ben is a person and Jerry is a person, but Ben and Jerry's is not a person. It's a corporate entity. And as people, we should make the rules on corporations. The Constitution provides plenty of protection, but the rules that we make in our states and in the country, that provides plenty of protection for companies. We should make those rules. So we said, let's get the dough out of politics and put it back in the ice cream where it belongs. So that was not a very popular thing with a lot of other companies, though, because they wanted those protections. We think they have them. Where business is going now, where we think the future is going, is that a lot of companies really understand this social purpose alongside the economic purpose and the product or service purpose. There's one movement that's picking up. It's called the Benefit Corporation movement, or the Certified B Corp. And this is where companies can take an assessment, and they have to achieve a certain score. It's 80 out of 200. And if you achieve that score, you can get the certification. It's like a B. Looks like the Bruins. Sorry about the Bruins last night. Anyways, if you pass that certification, you can put it on your products or on your corporate communications, and people are starting to understand what that B means. Certified B Corp is what fair trade is to fair trade products, and companies can do that. We actually are going fair trade. So we have fair trade certification, certified B Corp. Those certifications are important. I think that's an important theme, is that people trust that. They trust that third-party certification There needs to be credibility behind it, but we're seeing that these movements are credible. Now, one thing you might see here is this kind of cartoonish board of directors. Ben & Jerry's actually has a very unique structure. We're owned by Unilever, and we were purchased by Unilever in the year 2000. But we're a Vermont company with one shareholder, and Unilever had the vision to create a governance structure that was very unique. So Ben & Jerry's and Unilever have this legal document that created a super benefit corp. We actually have a board of directors that's independent, that makes sure that we are committed to having a vigorous social mission alongside product and economic mission. And so that board, instead of just one benefit director, that board is like our social mission benefit board. And they keep us to task. Now, how this all translates to the trust thing and the relationship thing is that we report out to people every year. Since 1989, we've been actually having a social report on how are we doing. And the important thing about this is to be honest, to say, look, we didn't do so well here, and we're telling you about it, and this is how we're going to fix that. And so we have a constant relationship, whether it's through our web or digital media or social media. We're letting people know, honestly, look, sometimes this stuff is tough. We said we were going to convert to fully fair trade. We're going to convert to fully non-GMO. We thought we'd get there by the end of 2013, but you know what? We got over 100 ingredients and over 200 products. We're not going to get there. And we're sharing it online so people can see it. And we think that's really important. If people know that you're going to be honest with them, and if they have a way to find that out, you're going to create an incredible relationship. So trust is all about relationships. Relationships are complicated. But when you share honestly and transparently with your consumers and your customers, we think you're going to have a much deeper, more loyal customer base. We've seen that companies that follow this through the Great Recession perform better than other companies because the people were there for them. And that's where we think this is all going. There's going to be more of this, more accountability, more transparency, more honesty in the complicated relationship that we have to build that trust. Thanks.
That is a tough act to follow because all I want is ice cream now. That's all I can think about. But it's too early for that. Hi everybody, I'm Anjali, Kumar. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very honored to be on the stage, not only in Ford, but to follow speakers such as yourself. Just a quick background on myself so you have some context for why I'm up here talking to you. I'm a lawyer. I'm the General Counsel and Head of Social Innovation at Warby Parker. I started my career at a law firm, but when I went to law school, I had an incredible bleeding heart, and I thought there's no way I'm going to practice law. I'm going to go out and save the world as soon as I graduate. And instead, I ended up with $50,000 in debt after law school and realized I'm going to a law firm. I'm going to pay off my law school debt first, and then I'm going to go save the world. So I eventually made good on that promise a bit. I ended up at Rob Michalak Foundation after 9/11. That was a big wake-up call for myself and a lot of other people thinking, what are you waiting for? If not now, when? I went to Rob Michalak Foundation, which is a poverty-fighting nonprofit based in New York City. And then from there went to Acumen Fund, which is a venture philanthropy based also in New York City that provides critical goods and services to the bottom of the pyramid. So it supports both for-profits and nonprofits operating that space. That Acumen Fund is actually where I first met Neil Blumenthal, one of the co-founders of Warby Parker. Our paths crossed there because we were funding an organization called Vision Spring, and he was the director there at the time. From Acumen, I went to Google, which in my mind was still very much in that nonprofit sort of ecosystem because it was mission-driven. And so from my perspective, it was like, well, why struggle for funding? They have all this money, and I can actually change the world and have some money behind it, which would be pretty exciting. I spent 6 years there, which brings me back to Warby Parker just a few months ago. It's been an incredible journey, but Warby sort of brings it all together for me, and I'm really excited to be here and share a bit of Warby's history with all of you. So to that end, am I pushing the wrong button here? There you go. How many of you people wear glasses? Okay, and so how many of you feel like you've ever overpaid for glasses? Right. So this is really where our story starts. Our founders realized that they were overpaying for glasses. They had this common frustration of having overpaid for glasses at some point in their lives, and kind of thought more about, like, well, why does this actually happen? What's the reason for this? And they didn't think that glasses should be costing as much as something. Oh, this is not working for me, I'm sorry. Having technical issues. Excuse me. This gets really good, I promise you. I think I'm doing something wrong here. I'm pushing the wrong button, is that what I'm doing? Yeah. Okay, so our founders start with trying to figure out why glasses cost so much and what can they do to change that. So the first operating principle was that eyeglasses should not cost the same as an iPhone. This is 800-year-old technology. It's plastic. It's got a couple of metal screws and bits on it, some glass. And why does this piece of technology that's actually quite basic and it's been around forever cost as much as something like an iPhone, which is arguably cutting-edge technology and has bits and pieces in it that warrant that cost? And the second thing was that they were thinking eyeglasses should be able to be sold online. You're seeing things like engagement rings being sold online through companies like Blue Nile, shoes being sold online through Zappos, categories that people never thought could actually be sold online. And here they are actually doing pretty good business doing both of those things. So based on that, we started thinking, well, there's something to be disrupted here, and there's something that we can actually make a difference in. When you look at the ecosystem of eyewear, probably a lot of you have bought one of these eyewear-only brands. Maybe you have a pair of Ray-Bans, or you've got a pair of Oliver Peoples on right now. You might have bought a fashion brand, maybe your favorite brand is Chanel or Polo, and so you've bought a pair of glasses that reflect your personality and style in one of those categories. You might have bought them at one of these retailers, Lens Crafters or Prohibition, maybe a Target optical shop. And you might have used an insurance company like iMed to actually pay for the glasses. That's the second largest vision insurance plan in the country. But what people don't realize is that this entire ecosystem is owned by one company called Luxottica, an Italian-based company. So when you see that, it sort of starts to make a little bit more sense why glasses cost as much as they do. So we set out to design our first collection using premium products, using premium components to actually design styles that we all loved and that we thought people would love to and want to wear. And so the idea was to sell eyewear at a fraction of the cost. We sell them for $95, including the prescription lenses, and we provide world-class customer service. Those are sort of the key operating principles of the idea. And we sell this all online. The question ultimately was always, will people actually buy their glasses online? Like, well, people want to try them on, you actually want to know what they look like. So we partnered with a technology company that was developing this pretty amazing virtual try-on technology and started providing our glasses online through this technology. And that's a picture of Dave, one of our co-founders and my boss. I think he should go for a lighter shade, but that's just me. But then we thought, maybe that's not enough. Maybe people still won't be convinced by that technology. People, they want to put them on their faces and know what they look like in the mirror and ask their friends and family, like, which pair do you like better, and want that experience. So we started a home try-on program, which was for 5 days. You could order in 5 frames, 100% free, try them on at your leisure, try them on at home, show them to your friends and colleagues, and get an opinion. If you like any of them, you can order those in your prescription. And if you don't, you just send them all back. And all that's free of charge. Obviously, you pay for the glasses eventually if you buy them, but the entire process is free of charge. And that was really kind of the first of its kind in the US, and really, I think, set us apart from the pack. So then the question really became, what kind of company did we want to build? And what we realized is, very much inspired by the folks at Ben & Jerry's and companies like that, is that we wanted to build a company that did good in the world and that could actually change the way people not only bought their glasses, was consumer friendly, but also was having an impact in the world and showing that you can do well and also do good. And the way we do that is by taking into account our stakeholders at every point in the process. So our stakeholders we've identified as our customers, which our way of serving them is selling them $95 glasses, free shipping, free returns, including your prescription. Our employees is our next group of stakeholders. We create a really open environment for learning. We take responsibility for everybody else's learning within the company. Do things like 360-degree reviews, do a lot of training within the company. We have fun team events that get a little kooky and do all sorts of fun stuff just to create an environment that everybody really wants to come to work in every day. The environment, we're 100% carbon neutral. We purchase carbon offsets to offset any carbon emissions that are emitted from our factories in producing our glasses or in shipping our glasses to customers or from the electricity in our stores. And we also, this is something I'm really proud about, well, I'm not proud of this statistic, 1 billion people in the world don't have access to glasses, which again is just completely crazy. It doesn't make any sense at all that this really basic piece of technology that could really change somebody's life is not widely available. It's been shown that if you can provide somebody a pair of glasses, it can increase their earning potential by up to 20%. And that's just a staggering statistic. It's really saying they get an extra day's worth of pay just by having a pair of glasses that they can actually see. So the fact that we can't solve this problem just is completely crazy to me. So we're really setting out to try to help solve this problem by providing access to glasses in low-income communities around the world. We partner with local nonprofits to train what we call vision entrepreneurs, who are low-income men and women who are trained to actually sell glasses in their communities, so that we're creating jobs and creating a sustainable solution to the problems. That's part of our Buy a Pair, Give a Pair program, but it's really more accurately buy a pair and help distribute a pair to somebody in need. So our kind of core hierarchy of messaging, we really lead with the fact that we're a fashion brand. We're creating great glasses with that are beautiful, that you're going to want to own and actually put on your face, and that are going to say something about you and also help you see. We offer value and service as sort of our second tier of messaging, that it's really well made, that the products are these high quality acetates with Teflon coated screws and all these buzzwords that mean a lot to people who wear glasses, things that are going to hold up. And then we offer amazing customer service, free shipping, free returns. And then the third piece being the social mission. The third piece is not third in ranking because it's not important to us. I think it's something that drives all of us. It helps us retain and recruit really wonderful talent. And it's certainly what gets me up in the morning. It helps me get really excited about being at work. But we realize that it's not necessarily what's most important to our customers. What they care about is how the glasses look. They want to look great in their glasses. They want to feel good about how they look. They need them to function. And that's the most important thing driving their purchase. And the social mission is sort of a nice to have and something that might bring them back to Warby Parker and create loyalty, but it's not necessarily what's driving their initial purchasing decision. So in February 2010, we launched features in both GQ and Vogue, which was crazy and amazing. And the company just took off like a rocket ship. It's been an incredible ride. Within the first 3 weeks, we sold out of our inventory, and then within 4 weeks, we were out of our top 15 styles. The first 3 weeks, we actually sold out. We hit our first year's sales targets in those first 3 weeks, and then in the first 4 weeks, we actually sold out of our top 15 styles. So we obviously really underestimated demand. So note to self for the next launch. Another couple of things that we do to actually really connect with our consumers is we try to create these innovative commercial experiences to connect with them. So one of the things that we have a showroom in our office space, actually. There's people coming in and out of our office all day long trying on glasses, which was really fun. The first showroom was actually in Neil Blumenthal's apartment, so talk about trust. You've got all these crazy people who saw these features in Vogue and GQ actually coming into your house. I think that's a pretty level of trust. We also created the Holiday Spectacle Bazaar, which was a really great experience in New York. If any of you lived in New York a couple of years ago. And then we also opened our flagship store just a few months ago on Green Street, right in the middle of Soho, right across from the Apple store, next door to the Ralph Lauren store. And we're really proud of this store. It's an exciting opportunity for people to connect to our brand and actually try on the glasses in person. And one last thing is the class trip. We took a bus. We actually retrofitted a school bus and have been driving around the country for the past year. It's currently in Seattle. And people can actually go into the school bus and try on glasses and then place an order. So it's sort of a fun way to interact with our consumers and sort of bring our product to them. I know I'm out of time. Last quick thing, a Net Promoter Score of 91. We're really proud of this statistic. For those of you who know what that is, it's basically customer satisfaction. And for us to have that score is pretty awesome. We're really excited about it. To give you an example, Zappos and Apple are kind of considered best in class for that number, and their numbers are more like high 70s, low 80s. So we kind of crushed it a little bit. No offense, to see Steve Wozniak here. It's a little intimidating. And then also, we believe that about 50% of our traffic is actually driven by word of mouth, which is a pretty extraordinary stat. I'm so out of time, but I have all these fun slides and a really cute story about social media, but you guys will just have to stay tuned and I'll tell you another time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jim Farley. I'm Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing and Service, and also looking after the link and revitalization of the company. And I usually don't get nervous, but I'm nervous today because this is a really interesting and important topic for our company at this point in time. Trust is not only, as it was explained, not only an important imperative for us as a business, as a social institution, but it's also a really important business topic. And it's also very personal. So, in 1977, I was a really responsible kid. I had always had a paper route. I always worked. My friends were goofing off, but that wasn't me. I got a job in a Ford remanufacturing plant in California, took a bus out there from here in Michigan, and I got a crazy idea to restore a 1965 Mustang by myself, and I slept in the back all summer. I didn't tell my parents, and I traded in my plane ticket to drive for gas money, drive back across the United States. I was 15. I didn't have a driver's license, didn't have any insurance, I had no spare tire, and it was fantastic. Well, I got home in Michigan, and I learned a lot about trust because I had broken my parents' trust in me and my judgment. I had a great time. I wouldn't change it for the world, but I quickly realized that they didn't trust my judgment anymore. And boy, America's going through the exact same thing with big companies right now. Do they trust us or not? This is highly tied to authenticity as well. If you look at the statistics, in the last 10 years, there's been a 50% drop in trust towards brands in the US. It's really accelerated after the Great Recession. And it's highly tied to authenticity of the company. I think the presentations today really highlighted that. It came home for us when we decided to be different than our two domestic competitors and not ask for a bailout. We learned a lot about trust and authenticity and what a business driver it is. Literally within a few months, we started to see dramatic change in the number of customers walking into our dealerships. It was so clear and so obvious. It drove such a different trajectory for the company. And so for us, and for me personally, coming here from Toyota after 20 years, just before that happened, trust is a quite intimate and interesting and growing importance for us as a company, but something we can really feel. Why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. Big companies have disappointed a lot of customers. But I think it's more important, even more fundamental than that. Because a lot of products look great, and a lot of products don't break anymore. So when everyone has great products that don't break, that are highly reliable, and they look great, what becomes your differentiator as a company? Now, look at the data. The correlation between trust and interest in a brand has gone up 35% in just 3 years. So at the time when Americans are trusting companies and brands less, it's becoming more important for them to drive their decisions. If you want to be a premium player, a premium pricer, you better figure out trust in your category really fast. this is such an important change for customers. We always knew that trust was important, but it's becoming a differentiator now. Well, it used to be a kind of thing that some companies talked about because it was their founding principle or what differentiated them, what felt right and natural for their company. But now, it's a true differentiator in categories where all the products look similar and have high quality. I'm not saying the product isn't important. I mean, we made huge bets in the toughest of times on fuel economy and in-car technology. But trust is changing too. In the world, in my world of advertising, for example, when every ad can be customized to a customer, privacy is literally 50% of the time we talk about advertising. Have any of you ever gotten a creepy ad on Facebook? I mean, really creepy, like, how do they know how old I am and where I live and what my credit score is? But that day is here. With the new digital advertising model, all of us are understood to such a granular level that we're going to get personalized advertising. And how a company treats that confidentiality will be a big part of how people trust the brand and what their pricing power may be. Giving back, boy, what a differentiator that is. People expect it. But how you do it is becoming more important and as a differentiator. We're spending more and more time in the trust area, especially around our product, on health and wellness. You know, you're sitting in a car a couple hours a day, we should be able to tell you how your body is doing. We have sensors in the car. You're interacting with the product. It's a natural role for us. And it's an extension of our social compact with our customers. I want to talk about accountability in the new era of trust as a differentiator. The big companies, they make mistakes. I remember a couple months ago, Alan was speaking at the Bangkok Auto Show, and I get a call from our head of India. He said, Jim, I have to tell you, something very bad's happened. Our advertising agency, without us knowing, has run an ad, submitted an ad for a competition that we didn't ask for. It's completely offensive. It's gone out on the internet and it's going global. What should we do? That happens. So what do? Do you say it's the ad agency's fault? No, it's not our fault. They did it without our permission. You could do that. It doesn't really matter in customers' eyes. What matters is you take accountability immediately. You apologize. You do it in a sincere way, and you start with your employees, because they're the ones watching the closest. Accountability is such a critical part of your trust with customers, because sometimes things don't go according to plan. And look, why is that important? Because 65% of people in the US believe they or their friends can really change a company's behavior. Customers not only vote for their pocketbook, but they know they can change how a company does things. And if you do something that's not right, you have to make it right, and you have to apologize. It's human nature, right? At Ford, we're really taking the quality step forward. Even as we introduce new technology, it's been very challenging. All the in-car technology we put in our vehicles now is a big bet for us as a differentiator. The HMI doesn't work perfectly. We're not software engineers. And we've learned a lot about My Ford Touch and Sync and how to make it better. You heard from Bill Ford today about how important green is. It's not only imperative for us as a car company, but frankly, as a family company, it's even more fundamental than that. But what we're really learning more as a company is how important it is to connect with the local community. Trust for us is not only the product's execution, but it's our presence locally. We started a small program called Driving Skills for Life. It has a very generic name. But basically, a local dealer takes cars and they do test drives at a high school, and the money that they raise, we give entirely to the local high school. It sounds like a very simple program. Oh my goodness. It had such impact for those dealers. They literally saw 50, 100% increases in the number of customers coming in their showroom. Because they were just simply helping the local school. They were doing the right thing. It was a simple program. We've now expanded, frankly, across the world. And boy, does it have impact on our business. I think that's really what's important. My grandfather joined Ford in 1913. He was 380 employees. He's somewhere in that picture in front of Highland Park. He was an orphan in Dearborn. He went to Greenfield Village as a school because Mr. Ford felt sorry for him and allowed the orphanage to go to school there for free. He had a great career here, started as an hourly worker, and then he started his own dealership. And why I bring that up is because there's a new growing element of trust for brands like us, which is what happens in the retail space. We have 9,500 dealers around the world. Many of them are in the smallest C&D counties. They've been there for more than 100 years. They've been through wars and depressions. Many of them are on the 4th or 5th generation. And we, like my grandfather, we put our reputation on the line in those communities based on those retailers. And we're just starting to truly understand this idea of trust and their impact on the local community. Because for us, trust is not just green, it's not just doing the right thing with water use, electricity, it's also how we come to life in our local communities. And we're learning, and we plan to continue to differentiate ourselves and invest more in feeling and being a more local company. I know when I asked my grandfather, what was he most apprehensive about, because he worked until he was 99 at the dealership every day. He said, I don't care about making money at the dealership. I just want to know that when I go to a party with my family, everyone comes up to me and says, thank you, you treated me the right way. For him, trust was his reputation. And we have to think more fundamentally like that through our retailers around the world. It's our chance as a company to impact those local communities. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share our own journey at Ford, what we've learned about this, how we're working harder and harder. And we really want to invite all the speakers up here and be able to do an open Q&A with all of you. Thank you.
Boy, those were pretty good sessions. I hope you all enjoyed it. So what we've got right now is about 40, 45 minutes, and when you do things like this, you say, we're going to make this interactive, and then you just talk. We're going to really actually try to make this interactive. So what I'm going to do is I have a series of questions for these folks, and about the halfway mark, we're going to stop doing that. We're going to open it up for the audience questions. Okay, and I think probably when we do that, I'm sure there'll be somebody with a mic. So one of the things we do at Ethisphere, again, is we think about measurement, and we think about, and we always, when we measure companies, we always think, how do you compare yourself? How do you look in the mirror? So we always do it by industry. So I guess I would sort of open it up to the panel and say, what other companies do you really sort of admire? Obviously, the three companies up here are wonderful companies, but let's just start with Ben & Jerry's. Who does Ben & Jerry's sort of look out there and say, gee, they're really doing something special?
Quickly, 3 companies come to mind for different reasons. One is Divine Chocolate. Divine Chocolate has kind of a shared equity model where the producers of the cocoa sharing the equity of the company, and it translates all the way through to the retail. So I love that model of shared equity. It takes things a little bit further. Another is Dr. Bronner's Magic Soaps. Anybody go camping? Dr. Bronner's is just an extraordinary company that really has worked in the supply chain area to really bring fair and equitable commerce all the way through their business. So they're great, and they really stand behind what they're all about. And last is Patagonia. Patagonia is a wonderful company that really is out there and shares their journey in terms of their products and trying to figure out how they can be effective and profitable without having a great impact in the world.
I would echo some of what you said. I mean, certainly Ben & Jerry's for us is a huge inspiration on the social mission side in terms of how they've really woven that into the DNA of the company, and I think it's something that we really aspire to do too, and to set that as a model for new businesses. And Patagonia would have been the other one that I would have highlighted as well for the same reasons that you articulated. And I think on the sort of retail space, companies that are creating a brand lifestyle around their brand. So a company like Apple or Nike or Ralph Lauren, you know, like these are sort of iconic brands that really create that experience.
Thanks, Jim. How about you?
It's kind of an interesting question because our category doesn't have, I would say, a large amount of excellence. So I think we all respected deeply what Saturn tried to do. For many years, Saturn really was this brand where customers didn't have to negotiate the price and felt like they trust the company. Ironically, you know, from the largest car company in the world. But over time, you know, the product deteriorated, they didn't keep it fresh. But even at the end, when they had maybe not the freshest product, the average person buying a Saturn paid twice as much profit to the retailer than any other brand in our industry. It's a pretty amazing statistic and shows what trust really means in terms of customers. I think the Subaru, I think, is a brand that we, you know, all of us really admire in terms of how they present the company. But you have to go outside of the category. You know, companies like Tesco, who listen carefully to the local community, shut down the store so that cashiers can really listen to the community and when the trucks deliver and the flow of traffic in and out of the store. I think for our retailers, 9,500 retailers, there's a lot to learn from companies like Tesco in terms of really engaging the local community and how you run your business. So it would be, I don't know if there's anyone, you know, really in our space that would be the best example.
Okay, thanks. So obviously the theme of this is trust is the new black, right? And we've all been around, you know, I sort of think about it sometimes, whatever McKinsey comes out with, well then so many companies then run around, you know, whether it's innovation, whether it's working at the speed of E. So, and then I think again about trust is the new black, and I was looking at the agenda for the upcoming Aspen Ideas Festival. And actually a friend of mine that I work with at Thomson Reuters is moderating a session called Trust is the New Global Currency, which is kind of interesting. So Anjali, I'll start with you and say, are we going to be talking about trust in 5 or 10 years, or are we going to be talking about something else?
I would hope that it just becomes an expectation. Like, I don't know that it's not really a conversation that we have in the office, because I think it's just something that is woven into everything that we do. So I don't know that in 5 to 10 years, this kind of conversation will be necessary. There's so much transparency in the world with things like the internet, you know, and consumers really digging in to find out what information they want and how they actually inform their purchasing decisions. But I feel like that will just become the standard, and it will be like a topic that you have to build a conference around. I hope, anyway.
Right. Jim, what do you think?
Oh, I do think we will be, customers are really moved, you know, on this topic. What I mean by that is, you know, the trends are really clear. People are trusting companies less and less and less, and it's becoming more important to them. So I think we will, no doubt, be talking about this for many years to come, but I think the discussion will be more specific. What I mean by that is trust is a pretty big, broad topic, but for companies like Ford, confidentiality, doing good, those will become more specific expectations that will definitely change. I mean, I cannot emphasize enough how, looking around the corner in advertising, how big this privacy issue is going to be. It's going to be a fundamental change as an advertiser. I'm on a couple of social media client councils, and literally it's 50%, like I said, of what we talk about. How we treat and handle our confidential information from our customers. We get socials, we get it all when you submitted a finance application to buy a Ford anywhere in the world. And the regulations are different everywhere. How we handle that moment, or we know where your car is, what destination you put in the nav system, we know who you called, we know where you've driven, how fast you've driven, we know your throttle position.
I'm getting scared.
So, so how we, and with onboard modem, we can send that to anywhere. So with all that, how we handle that information about you as a customer at Ford is going to be a big part of whether people trust us or not. Now, those things weren't possible even a couple years ago. Oh no, I think this will be something we'll continue to look at, and I think at Ford we'll, hopefully we'll be smart about it and use it as a differentiator.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's a nuanced conversation, because if you stand on the top of a building and say, we differentiate ourselves by trust, that doesn't exactly induce trust if you were sort of bragging about it, right? So Ben and Jerry's, and you've even become, obviously, you mentioned in 2000 part of Unilever. How do you, what do you think about it? Do you think in 5 or 10 years from now, that will be core in what you're doing, establishing that relationship with your clients different than perhaps others that you sort of compete with?
Yeah, and I think it's growing. I think the way we're seeing it, it's not so much that we say, trust us. It's the way you behave. It's your governance. It's your transparency. And what we're seeing is more and more companies getting involved with that communication and that extension in terms of reviews and reports, third-party certifications, those various programs. Those are all growing. We're seeing more and more companies get into that kind of a movement. And I don't know, it's 5 or 10 years, but I think we're seeing the shift. I think everybody's trust is violated in 2008 and 2009, kind of rattled all of us. And now we're coming out of that, and we're seeing the movement grow, where governance, transparency, and that relationship, the communication between the customer and the company is really going to grow and prosper, I think.
Jim, you talked a little bit about authenticity and, in a sense, how it relates to trust. And Ford's been around a while, right? More than 100 years. So talk about how that authenticity is really different from heritage.
What a great question. They're absolutely different things. We don't want to be a brand that lives in the past, but the same token, when we went through what the industry did where the revenue just collapsed and the other 2 companies didn't make it and they needed help, and our supply base would have collapsed, and so would we if they collapsed. So we had this moment. I think the Ford company, maybe it's because it's family or whatever, the DNA of the company was this challenger brand. We were always the company that made not just the Model T, but the Mustang. We always kind of, on our best day, we're a challenger brand. So the idea to go back to that authentic roots and say, we don't need any help. We'll pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we'll find a way to get through this without asking for help, was a moment for us to differentiate ourselves. I think maybe a different company wouldn't have come to that conclusion. But we had to, because that's our roots. The same for democratizing technology. That's an authentic place for us. We could have charged $1,000 for sync. Maybe 10% of the people would have bought it. But we charged $200 for it. Because that's what Ford does. What turns us on is democratizing to a lot of people. Not making fancy things for rich people, but making cool things for a lot of people. That scale is important to our authenticity. I think companies kind of rediscovered that blue oval. We had all these brands like Jag and Range Rover and Land Rover. It was harder to make that blue oval, cool and authentic. Now that that's all we got, and the Lincoln logo, I think we've all kind of fallen back in love with that authentic part of Ford.
Let's talk a little bit, as a relatively new company, let's just sort of keep going on authenticity. How do you keep going what you guys have started? You sold out of your products and beat your sales number in 3 weeks, sold out in 2 months. How do you keep that going?
It's an exciting challenge, and I think a big part of it is being authentic. I think the value that we all, and connecting with our customers and really having them feel invested in what we're doing. I think we're offering something that's unique. It's a great product, like what you're describing, a great product at a great price point. It's democratizing fashion, but it's still creating something sort of aspirational. That's like a beautiful product too. Design matters, and so just continuing to do that and to continuing to iterate and launch new collections and make it a fashion accessory that's affordable. So I think that's how we hopefully keep hitting those numbers and selling out and doing all these great things. But I think also just making sure that we're meeting our customers where they need us to. So if they're not comfortable buying online, that we have a way for you to actually come into a showroom. I don't think it's one or the other. It's creating that kind of complete experience.
I'm going to come back to something that I think each presentation touched upon, and that's just culture. So one of the things we think a lot about, and when we do things like World's Most Ethical Companies, is we actually try to measure the culture of an organization. There's no perfect organization, right? But it's really what you do about it. It's that accountability. Do your employees feel like their stakeholders feel like they can raise their hand? So I'd like each of you to talk a little bit about, especially in today's society, one of the questions we have is there too much transparency? But talk about culture when everything's out there all the time and it moves so fast. Maybe start with you and then go over to Jim. So how do you deal with that?
Well, there are certain boundaries with anything. I mean, transparency, you could get into proprietary information, which, can be a disadvantage in the marketplace. So you have to really figure out where those boundaries are. Transparency with an internal organization as well. You could share information that some people just don't have the maturity to handle. But you create a culture, and depending on how you do that within your culture, we're much smaller than Ford, but we do the town meeting style. We say, hey, look, we're sharing this, and we're trusting you to maturely handle this information. So we keep pushing. You don't really know where that transparency line is. Sometimes you just bump up against it, but we keep pushing out further and further. Our board of directors, that independent board of directors, they want us to be totally transparent. They want us to behave in a way, what do we got to hide, Let's put it all out there. But, we're not going to let everybody know our cookie dough recipe, that's for sure.
I would echo what you said. I mean, I think it's a line. I think internally we're incredibly transparent, and I come from a culture of that kind of transparency, coming from Google. That's very much a similar culture and something that I personally value a lot. But yeah, when we give the secret sauce away, then we won't be selling out of our frames, and we won't be able to offer that same price point. So I think there's sort of where do you draw the line of what's a competitive advantage or what's building your business. And how much transparency can you have. But I would argue in favor of as much transparency as possible and as business smart, because I do think it does the other things that you mentioned, builds a connection to the brand. It shows that you're authentic and you're trying to catch your consumers and actually give them the information they want to make an informed decision.
What do you think?
I don't want to add to comments already made, other than maybe one incremental thought, which is especially around transparency. Ford's culture is going through a big shift, and it's very exciting for those at Ford, especially for me as a newcomer to Ford. The one element I just emphasize is, can you come up with a business system that treats the transparency consistently all the way through a complex organization? We have a BPR process here. I know it's an acronym, but Alan put it in place, and it's a magical thing. From the board of directors all the way through to the smallest work group at Ford, we have a way of looking at the external environment and our business and coding our assessment, and that's kind of a transformation for Ford, or for a complicated company like Ford, to have a consistent way that no matter what function, no matter where you are in the company, physically, any geography, we all kind of look at the business with the same level of transparency that's consistent. that's a big culture change at Ford. It's enabled a big culture change at Ford. I think a very exciting development. I mean, we got a long way to go to have a really exciting, sustainable culture, but I think some of those things that Alan and the leadership team we've worked on have really helped to turn a corner.
Can I just add a couple of things I think is really important, just real quickly? What trust and transparency internally and externally do is internally, if you can push it out there and the employees trust you in that process, they're going to get more input to help you get stronger and better at what you do. And it happens all the time. And externally, when you do have, we are fallible, we do fall sometimes. If customers know that and you're transparent as much as you can be, they forgive you sooner, faster. So there's benefits to creating a more resilient, brilliant culture, work culture that can help you grow. And then externally, there's more forgiveness and more acceptance and more loyalty.
I think that is such a key point you just mentioned. On our BPR, we always invite guests, and I don't think we ever properly understood the power of people watching the leadership team, knowing there's no secret meeting, that our meeting where we look at the business honestly is like open to anyone. That was a big culture change, to your point, and we find the traction we get from just that simple gesture of please be a guest, there's no secret meeting, you're going to see everything. And then run it through the whole company, to your point about alignment.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and again, one of the things we think a lot about is measuring a formerly opaque area, such as ethics. So, Ford, a company of engineers, and you talked about the BPR, and I think many of us have read the stories when Mr. Mullally got here, and the red, yellow, green, and everything was green, but then he reported a multi-billion-dollar loss.
13.
Oh, ouch. Anyway, and then you talked about metrics where most of us are pretty familiar with, Net Promoter Score and other things like that, and you put up some metrics around, hey, here's where we're doing a good job, here's where we're not. So maybe just starting with Ford, how do you usually, in terms of ethics and trust and culture, how do you even measure it?
I think ultimately we kind of turn to, it's a good question, we turn to favorable opinion. So ultimately we were able to kind of correlate pricing power to people's opinion, favorable opinion of our overall product lineup, which is different than corporate reputation. And that metric has been very helpful for us. And it's surprising how important a person like me, being company for a person like me, correlates to trust and also to strong favorable opinion, which turns into pricing power. All those things correlate, and we now measure it everywhere in the world by vehicle line every quarter.
How about you?
Sure. Net Promoter Score certainly is one measure that we do think 50% or more.
And be sure to also speak to employees, because I think so much of it comes, it's the talent that differentiates yourself, and it's creating an environment where the talent wants to be there, right? And the talent feels they can thrive, which is not easy, right? Especially in a really big company. It's probably much harder, I think, in big companies or as companies grow, but also besides the external with customers. I definitely want you to touch upon how you sort of measure with your employees.
Yeah, I think just the fact that people are staying, we're still a young company, we're only 3 years old, we're one day older than my child, so it's really, we're a very young company and, prone to tantrums, I suppose, just like my child, but just getting our sea legs and really figuring it out. So I think it's a work in progress, but the fact that people are sticking with us and that our, even employees who leave, go on to continue to be customers and evangelists of our brand is pretty powerful. They're still feeling very connected to the company, even if they're moving on to other opportunities, which I think speaks really well of the company. And then things on the consumer front, I was going to show a slide when I ran out of time of, we send out these customer service sort of videos that we've been doing because we interact a lot with our customers on things like Twitter and on Facebook, and 140 characters to respond to a question on Twitter isn't necessarily enough all the time. So we started doing these little videos where a customer service person would answer the question in a short YouTube video and then send it back to the customer. And what we were finding is that people were actually forwarding these links on to people, and other people were watching them, and it's like, that's really bizarre, if you think about it. It's like me getting a customer service response to my email and sending it on to 100 of my friends. Like, who would do that? But that's what's happening. And so the fact that people are interacting with our brand in that way is a really powerful statement for us.
And we measure, we do a lot of measurement internally. So we do internal measurements with employees annually. We're asking them, do they feel engaged? Do they look at the social mission and product and economic? Do they feel informed, engaged, empowered, or not? And so, we have extensive metrics annually that we do internally. As I was showing too, externally we have metrics that measure our performance in supply chain, but also in community action and activism. And one of the things we want to keep doing is pushing that up and up and up. So, for example, we're measuring our fair trade conversion. What we want to know next is, what good does that do? Yeah, you can buy fair trade, but are the producers that fair trade is supposed to be benefiting, are they getting the benefit? Are they really participating in the global economy? So that's the next place, is really understand what's the impact. And same with employees. What's the impact of our company culture, decision making, and what your participation is in that. And so we do that every year.
I'd like to open it up to questions.
The trust meter has run out. Now we're gonna.
Go ahead.
Hi. First of all, I'm Karen. I want to say thank you for having me out today. Really appreciate it. When I got the invitation and I saw who was speaking, I love the programming, but Warby Parker was one of the reasons that I wanted to come out today. And I think on behalf of the audience, if I compliment you on your shoes.
Thank you.
I think they're really good. I think as consumers, on one aspect, and as professionals on another, individuals like myself are hungry for this next generation of ethical brand or for legacy brands as well. And if you think about it, you guys up on stage represent, 4 of those brands. There's so many brands. We touch so many products. There's thousands and billions of manufacturers, and really only a handful. You listen. You said Dr. Bronner's and supply chain, and Patagonia. But I was trust. Recently, I stay up at night and think about Warby Parker. I actually do. I know, and I Twitter with the campus bus, too. And I do digital detox, believe me. I was very concerned recently when Tom's came out and basically copied the eyeglass model. And I was really concerned with that because Warby Parker is a smaller, younger brand, and Tom's is quite known, and everybody wants to be aspirational and wear Tom's shoes because the Tom's name means something to who you are. You are a better person if you buy Tom's shoes, perhaps. How has that affected, Warby Parker and, your growth and where you'll be going over the next few years? And is Tom's, a threat to your future?
It's a great question. I think I come from the perspective, and I think I share this with the leadership at Warby, that all ships can rise. It's a huge industry, the eyeglass industry. Luxottica is making $8 billion a year or something. If we can even get a small piece of that, we'll be great. We'll really proven that we can disrupt this industry. And so I think there's plenty of room for a lot of disruptors. I don't think it's only one that can do it, because that's not what we're trying to prove. We're not trying to say we are the only ones who know how to do it. We're saying there's something flawed in this model. It's been an established industry doing this business in one way, and it doesn't need to be that way. So if other people are doing that, I think that's great, and I think Neil and Dave and others at Warby would agree with me. In terms of Tom specifically, we have a slightly different model in terms of how we do our philanthropic giving. It's very much inspired by companies like Tom's and like Ben & Jerry's, but we're focusing more on sustainable development in terms of actually creating jobs in local communities to then support those local communities. So it's helping low-income men and women actually sell their glasses in their communities. We're not, it's not like you're going to see a bunch of people in South India running around with hipster frames on it. They're being designed for those communities, and tastes differ around the world, and so our partners are conscious of that and designing for that and selling into those communities. So it's slightly different from the buy a pair, give a pair that Tom's does, but I think there's room for everybody.
Hi, Susanna from Gas2O. My question's for Jim.
brace yourself. Trustworthiness and reliability are synonymous, and Toyota, Honda, and GM trounced you in J.D. Power's dependability study. You're partnering with Toyota, the brand I had to leave Ford for, which broke my heart, because I had to get rid of my full-size van and get an SUV, because God forbid I get a minivan. And you're partnering with them to develop a viable full-size hybrid. Are they also teaching you how to build more reliable cars?
Well, the Ford quality story is quite diverse around the world. We have different operations, kind of different geographies and different vehicles. Some, groundbreaking, leading the industry, like we're doing in China. In the U.S., certainly our lead on in-car technology and the adoption rate of My Ford Touch and Sync are now 70% of our vehicles. And given all brands are going through this transition of bringing that much technology in, and we're literally double the next person in terms of the adoption rate. We're seeing a headwind as far as just customers getting used to pairing the phone, but more importantly, interacting with the vehicle with voice and gesture. So I want to, we're obviously totally committed to providing, the world-class quality that we've proven we can do. That was a foundational element for Ford's, improvement in the U.S. But as we've adopted more of new technology, like our DPS-6 transmission, our My Ford Touch and Sync, in all of our mass cars in very large volumes, we are absolutely learning, I think, before the industry. And we're seeing their data, by the way, go the same direction as their adoption rate for their in-car technology increases. We are absolutely learning a lot, and we're addressing these as fast as we can. And that's probably the biggest area in which we have opportunity. And we spend hours on it every day because we know how important it is. And I think actually the results outside of the U.S. are very encouraging to us, to the U.S. team, because we know how to make progress in this area. We don't need help from Toyota or others, because this is a very well-known process. But certainly putting that many lines of code in our cars and that much technology is something that is new for us. For example, just one example, as an industry, we're not used to upgrading our cars. But when you have 70% of your customers with the My Ford Touch or Sync system, and you have a better version, you got to upgrade all the vehicles. Now we have a media bin, but you could do that with a thumb drive. You can also load it over the internet on a thumb drive and upgrade your car. It takes about 45 minutes. People are not used to upgrading their automobile. It's a new thing we have to learn how to do as our industry. And Ford, because of our bet on technology, is learning it first. Is that a bad thing, or is that a good thing? I think it's kind of both. I'm glad that people are turning to Ford because of the in-car technology. It's a differentiator for us. Do we need to fix the air states? Absolutely. Are we learning new things that will allow us to be a leader of quality? Absolutely.
We've got time for one more.
Jim, sorry, I've got another question for you too, over here. Sorry.
Oh, there we go. Thanks.
Speaking of trust, I think Lincoln's a really interesting example, which has seen really great times, more recently less great times, poised now for the future for really more interesting things. I'd love to kind of hear your path for how Lincoln regains trust from customers.
Wow. Luxury is luxury automobiles kind of now dominated by the German model. Everyone, I think, would agree that, that's the definition of excellence in product. I think, for us, relevance for Lincoln will be to go back to our roots, in 1920s and 30s kind of roots, where when you bought a Lincoln, every Lincoln was different. So it was a personalized vehicle. The German brands offer personalization, but it's very expensive. $150,000, and you have to wait a long time. I think this idea of personalization is an area where Lincoln can really add a lot of value to the category and go back to its roots. The second one is really flowing elegance. A lot of the design execution, which is a big reason why people buy the product, is just the physical, how beautiful it looks. In the luxury category, we're seeing kind of the segment getting into a rut where beauty is defined by hard, cold technology. And Lincoln really believes, like we did a long time ago, that developing high technology vehicles that have more of a beauty and elegance and flow to them. But probably the most important part of our trust is our dealerships. Most of the reason why people stay loyal to a luxury automotive brand is because of what happens at the dealership. You know, I spent more than 20 years at Lexus, and it was clear that's what made it different more than anything. So we have a lot to do on the experience side. Some of the fun things we're doing that we think are appropriate, a 24/7 online concierge. So when you're shopping for your Lincoln, you get a live person online, 24/7. No one's ever had a personal shopper online. Those are the kind of things, date night, where you can date the brand, take you out to dinner, got to date the brand. Those are kind of new ways to break down the barrier of sampling the brand. But we're just starting this journey. And ultimately, it comes down to quality. Ultimately, our journey on Lincoln will come down to, you know, the evidence around trust, around our quality execution.
Okay. Panelists, thank you very much.